When light is no longer life, it burns through each layer of skin, each inch of flesh, and slowly scorches you to death. A death so painful it's unbearable. Lying in the middle of the deep blue ocean, Con Dao is an island so beautiful it feels poetic. But few people know that beneath this paradise lies a hell. A place that, according to many visitors, doesn't need ghosts to make you shiver. This is Con Dao Prison, one of the most terrifying prisons in Southeast Asia. This place doesn't just carry the memories of war, it holds on to something people call the cries that don't belong in this world. A French female tourist once shared, "I didn't know anything about this place. I was just following the group, but the moment I stepped into the Fuhai prison block, my chest suddenly tightened, and I started crying, for no reason at all, as if someone inside me had just died." She's not the only one. Some people, upon entering the Con Dao tiger cages, feel their legs give out, unable to take another step. Some see a white figure behind the iron bars, blurry like smoke. Some hear soft moans in the middle of the night, thinking it's just the wind, but then realize they can hear every single sob. Stories like these keep being told, like never-ending Vietnam ghost stories. And then there's something no one can explain. Why does this place make people cry, even when they've never heard a single word of its history? Is it because in a place where so many died in injustice, the pain still hangs in the air, waiting to be released? Or perhaps we're not crying for them, but crying on their behalf. It wasn't demons. It wasn't a curse. This place became hell for one reason, because humans chose to make it that way. Con Dao is a remote island chain in Ba Ria, Vung Tau province, once known as the untouched paradise in the ocean. But beneath that beauty lies a somber land, a place soaked in blood, tears, and a pain that has quietly endured for over a century. Con Dao Prison, or Con Son Prison, was built by the French colonialists in 1862, just 1 year after they occupied southern Vietnam. From that moment on, this island became the main site for imprisoning and torturing those considered dangerous to the regime, from resistance fighters and dissident journalists to communist revolutionaries. This was not a place meant to reform people. It was a place designed to destroy their body and soul. Not just one prison, but an entire complex system. 127 prison cells, 42 solitary confinement rooms, 504 tiger cages, and countless isolation zones, arranged like a labyrinth of violence. The torture methods weren't simply beatings, they were deliberate acts of destruction. Reverse binding, being doused with quicklime, starvation, water submersion, and shaving prisoners bald before pouring acid over them. People called this place hell on earth, not just for its brutality, but for its calculated dehumanization. Prisoners were no longer seen as human. They became living objects under control. Life in Con Dao wasn't measured in time. It was measured in groans, the clinking of chains, and open wounds that never healed. And the scariest part? All of it was real, documented, witnessed, photographed. Blood still stains the soil. Con Dao Prison isn't a horror story. It's a horrifying reality that chills us to this very day. In Con Dao, architecture wasn't meant for living, it was meant for destruction. Every brick laid was a blow to human dignity. If the numbers alone send chills down your spine, 127 prison cells, 504 tiger cages, 42 solitary confinement rooms, then it's the way they were arranged that truly made Con Dao a deliberately engineered nightmare. Con Dao Prison wasn't built like a conventional prison. It was a machine of oppression, a calculated complex of spaces designed to erode the body, strip away the will, and bury the humanity of those imprisoned. Fuhai Prison Block, one of the first built, was constructed in a closed rectangular shape, with cells backing onto each other, cutting off any light or sound from the outside world. In there, you didn't know day from night. You couldn't tell the sound of the wind from the sound of a voice. Only the cold, dead walls and the clinking of iron chains on stone, like a lullaby from hell. The cowshed, isolation zone, once used for keeping livestock, was repurposed into a detention area for humans. It was damp, filthy, and utterly unfit for survival. No airflow, ankle-deep water mixed with blood, feces, and the stench of decomposing bodies. None of this was accidental. It was the result of an oppressive mindset made solid through bricks, concrete, and metal. Not the guards, not the whips, but the architecture itself was the most silent and effective chain in the Vietnam War prison of Con Dao. And even to this day, every brick in those walls still holds the chill of voiceless nights. Because not everyone who was imprisoned here ever lived to tell the tale. There are places that torture with darkness, but here even light is a sentence. Among the massive prison complex of Con Dao, the tiger cages are what shocked the world, not only because of their brutality, but because of how they were disguised under a deceptively harmless design, open architecture. But that openness was no liberation. It was a death sentence drawn out in silence. The French-style tiger cages, or tiger cages Vietnam, were tiny enclosures barely big enough for one person to lie down. Above, there was no roof, only rusted iron bars. By day, the coastal sun beat down like fire, scorching the bare bodies of the prisoners. No water, no shade, no chance of protection. Skin blistered and peeled, wounds festered, blood and sweat crusted into a hardened mask. Those locked inside couldn't sit up. They couldn't turn or shift. Their hands and feet were chained to the wall, lying motionless like discarded objects beneath the fury of the sun. In contrast, the American-style tiger cages were the exact opposite, completely sealed, with not a single ray of light. Inside, there was no way to tell time, no day, no night. The only sounds were breathing, the faint wind through a tiny S-lie, or the soft whimpers of the person lying next to you. Many prisoners recalled, in that thick, suffocating darkness, they began to doubt themselves. They didn't know if they were alive or already dead. They stopped believing in voices, in memories, even in their names. Tiger cages, whether French or American, served one purpose: to strip away humanity. One burned the body, the other crushed the mind. And when both flesh and will were shattered, death no longer felt terrifying. It became a release they desperately longed for. Today, when visitors walk through the tiger cages, they can still see faint scratch marks on the stone floors, like someone had once clawed, begged, fought against fate. But no one ever got out that way. Because in this hell, even light could kill, and darkness was never a place to hide. Some deaths don't end in ashes. Some souls never leave the place where they perished. Today, Con Dao Prison stands as nothing more than faded stone walls, icy iron bars, and ruined, empty rooms. But one thing hasn't changed: the chill that runs down your spine when you step inside. Not because of the temperature, but because of something unseen that never left. Locals believe that the spirits of those who died in the prison, especially the revolutionaries who perished in agony and injustice, still linger here. Not out of hatred, but waiting to be remembered, waiting to be called by name. And that's where the spiritual stories begin. In the Tiger Cage Zone, where thousands were once imprisoned, many say they've heard faint moans at night, soft cries of pain that vanish into the air. Sometimes it's the dragging of chains across stone floors, echoing even when no one is inside. Some cleaning staff have shared while tidying up, they've seen a white figure standing silently behind the bars, like a prisoner waiting to be released. But in the blink of an eye, the figure disappears, as if it were never there. At Hang Duong Cemetery, the resting place of over 20,000 fallen soldiers, including national heroine Vo Thi Sao, many visitors have seen a woman in white walking silently past the graves after dark. Some claim they've heard a lullaby in the wind. Others say they've felt an invisible hand gently touch their shoulder as they bow in prayer. These Vietnam ghost stories aren't just folklore. In Con Dao, they are part of the island's spiritual fabric, a bridge between past and present. Because when death is buried in silence, sometimes it's the soul that speaks. You may not believe in ghosts, but in a place that has witnessed tens of thousands of moments of pain, injustice, struggle, and despair, the idea that some spirits never left doesn't seem so hard to believe. People usually light incense for the dead, but in Con Dao they also whisper prayers as if that soul were still alive. Among the many quiet spirits of Con Dao Prison, there is one that has never been forgotten. On the contrary, she is remembered, spoken of, and worshipped like a guardian goddess watching over this land of sorrow. Her name is Vo Thi Sao, a young girl from Baria, Vung Tau, only 16 years old when she was captured for joining the resistance against the French. She was sentenced to death and sent to Con Dao, becoming the first woman to be executed in the history of Vietnam's revolution. But what turned her name into legend wasn't her death. It was the way she faced it. Before being led to the execution ground, her final wish was this: not to be blindfolded. She spoke in a clear and fearless voice. "Let my eyes see my beloved homeland until the very last moment, and let me have the courage to look straight into the barrel of your gun." And when the French soldiers cocked their rifles, she lifted her head high, stopped singing, and shouted her final words. "Down with French colonialists. Long live independent Vietnam. Long live Ho Chi Minh." Not a single tear, not a single sign of fear. She walked into death as if stepping into a new life, a life of freedom, of truth, of immortality in the hearts of her people. She was buried without a funeral, no obituary, just a small grave resting quietly in Hang Duong Cemetery. But over time, that humble spot became a sacred pilgrimage site for millions, not only to remember but to pray, to speak, and to seek guidance. Some come for peace, some come for love, some come just to cry, as if her spirit were truly listening, comforting, and gently touching those still carrying invisible wounds. Among the many Vietnam ghost stories soaked in darkness, the story of Vo Thi Sao is a light in the night. No bitterness, no vengeance, only an unbreakable purity. A soul that chose to stay behind, not to haunt, but to protect. Some deaths shake the world, others are buried in silence, but not because they were any less painful. For decades, Con Dao Prison existed like a political ghost, hidden from view, muffled by silence. Even though over 20,000 people were imprisoned here, even though it witnessed countless scenes of torture, executions, and death without trial, the world seemed unaware. No images escaped, no international headlines, no formal accusations were acknowledged by the powers that controlled the media of the time. Because the most terrifying thing about evil is not that it happens, but that it happens with the silent consent of those who look away. Throughout the French colonial era, and later under the South Vietnamese government, the prison system on Con Dao was masked with polished names like Re-Education Center or High Security Detention Zone. But behind those stone walls were cold torture chambers, tiger cages where sunlight was weaponized, underground cells that felt like mass graves for the soul. It wasn't until 1970, when two American congressmen, Tom Harkin and William Anderson, broke into the tiger cages with the help of a former inmate, that the world saw, for the first time, what had happened here. Scars covering backs, bodies twisted from living too long without sunlight, eyes filled with terror from surviving far too long in hell. That was the moment the term Tiger Cages Vietnam shook global consciousness. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Countless acts of torture were never photographed. Countless deaths were never recorded. Graves without names, lives erased without ever being spoken of again. Those wounds no longer bleed, but they still exist in the crumbling stone walls, in the stained cement floors, and in the memories of the few who survived, if anyone survived to tell the tale. Con Dao Prison is not just a symbol of brutality. It's a symbol of how truth can be buried, distorted, and forgotten. And for that reason, every step we take on this ground today is a reminder. Some truths can't stay silent forever. Some people don't need statues, because the very place where they fell has already made them immortal. If Con Dao was hell on earth, then it was also the witness to some of the greatest souls in Vietnam's struggle for freedom. People who transformed pain into purpose, turned prison into a forge for willpower, and turned death into a symbol of liberty. The name of the heroine Vo Thi Sao is not alone among the rusted bars of this prison. Many pioneers, revolutionaries, and great thinkers were once held here, and it is they who gave Con Dao its spirit. Le Hong Phong, General Secretary of the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, the man who laid the ideological and organizational foundation for Vietnam's revolutionary movement, was tortured to death here in 1942. It is said that even as his body weakened, he refused to kneel. He refused to surrender. Nguyen An Ninh, a journalist, intellectual, and patriot known for his progressive ideas and democratic vision, was imprisoned in Phu Hai Camp. Each night he would write revolutionary thoughts on the walls, using blood and charcoal. He died in prison of tuberculosis and exhaustion, but his name lives on in the hearts of the southern Vietnamese people. Ton Duc Thang, who would later become the first president of unified Vietnam, also endured years of torture and confinement here, spending 17 years in Con Dao. Yet even in the darkness of his cell, he quietly organized resistance groups and nurtured the faith and morale of his comrades. Each name is a living chapter of history. Each story is a drop of blood soaked into the cold stone floors. And even now, their unbroken spirits seem to linger, never leaving, never fading, as if still standing guard for truth, for freedom, for justice. Visitors don't come here just to see ruins. They come to listen, to feel, to stand before these old graves and understand that greatness sometimes begins in the darkest places. Because Con Dao Prison wasn't just a place where people were imprisoned. It was where the human spirit broke free. Some places make you cry out of emotion, but in Con Dao, people cry without knowing why. There are no more leather whips, no more freezing iron bars, no more silent guards pacing through the night. Today, Con Dao wears a strangely peaceful face. Clear skies, blue seas, salty breezes, and rows of almond trees blooming with bright red flowers, as if their roots had never soaked in human blood. But beneath that beauty, there's still something that can't quite be named. A vague feeling that lingers in every breath, a sorrow with no shape. Many visitors say they knew little about the prison before arriving. Yet when they stepped into Phu Hai Camp, the tiger cages, or Hang Duong Cemetery, tears began to fall. No one told them to cry. No stories were being told. No somber music was playing. And yet something in the air felt heavy, dark, haunting, as if their hearts were breaking on their own. Some said they felt like they were being held back, as if an invisible force was slowing their steps at each prison doorway. Others entered the tiger cages and began to shake, frozen in place, as though unseen chains were binding them to the pain of those who once suffered there. Cleaning staff have shared stories too. Sometimes they hear soft sobs coming from an empty cell, then silence. One cleaner said she once saw a figure standing by the door of an isolation cell, beckoning. Thinking it was a lost tourist, she ran toward them, only to find no one. The figure had vanished, without a trace. You may believe it or not, but the truth is, Con Dao still makes thousands of people cry every year. Not because of blood, but because of the truth. Not because of words, but because of a collective wound that has never fully healed. And perhaps the forgotten souls who once suffered here are whispering through the ocean wind, reminding us, remember us. Don't forget this place. Don't let the past die in silence. We speak of freedom as if it's a given, but sometimes we forget that someone had to die in silence for us to have it. Con Dao is not an ordinary travel destination. It is a collective memory etched into every stone slab, every tree trunk, every gust of salty sea breeze that carries not only the scent of the ocean, but also of blood and tears. This place was once a machine of destruction, wrapped in cement and steel, designed not to imprison, but to break. And yet, the more the people here were tortured, the brighter their spirit became. The deeper they were pushed into darkness, the more fiercely their belief in freedom blazed. Souls like Vo Thi Sa, Lê Hồng Phong, Nguyen An Ninh, and the tens of thousands of nameless others, they did not disappear. They remain, not to haunt, but to guard something sacred, the memory of freedom, of courage, and of a truth that no one has the right to erase. Every step you take past the tiger cages is a step into someone's pain. Every time you rest your hand on a moss-covered stone wall, you are touching living history. And every candle lit at Hangong Cemetery is a whispered message to those who were never named in history books. Con Dao Prison is not a wound, it is a warning. That cruelty can be legalized, that justice sometimes arrives too late, and that some souls are not at rest, not because they refuse to leave, but because they are still standing guard over the freedom we live in today. So if one day you find yourself in Con Dao and suddenly feel the urge to cry without knowing why, don't hold it back, because maybe those very souls are borrowing your heart to speak the words they never had the chance to say in life.